So today we're here to talk about the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. This is the 2025 program. This is an annual funding opportunity through the USDA Department of Agriculture Marketing Service, USDA AMS, and the South Dakota Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources runs this program here in South Dakota. It's a pass-through grant, so every year the state solicits an opportunity for projects to apply, which is what we are doing right now. And then selected applications at the state level will be bundled together and proposed to USDA as a slate of projects to fund for the state, and that'll be the state's application to USDA. So right now we're here to talk about how to potentially apply for a project that would be the recipient of a subaward from the state. The Specialty Crop Block Grant Program's purpose is to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops produced in South Dakota. So we want to see projects that are focused on enhancing and benefiting the specialty crop industry in the state. That's what this program is created for. So there will be some limitations on what we can and cannot fund fitting within that overall purpose. One of the principal questions that we need to ask is, what is a specialty crop? What are we able to talk about? What projects can we fund? Vegetables, nuts, dried fruits, horticulture, and nursery crops, including floriculture. And that's the definition from USDA's website. There's a list of crops if you go onto our website, and I'll provide that link. There's a bunch of resources, some of which connect back to USDA's website, and USDA's website is where you'll find that definition and a long list of examples of other crops. So if you have a specific crop in mind, you'll be able to check that link, and that will hopefully help you. Some recent projects that we've seen in South Dakota have dealt with tomatoes, peppers, broccoli, sweet corn, grapes, cucurbits, honey, pulses, and cut flowers. So a pretty good mixture, but there are quite a few more eligible specialty crops in addition to those that I've just mentioned. This year, we expect to have about $340,000 available to fund subaward projects. USDA has not yet announced the federal funding round. Typically, that comes out at the beginning of January. This year, there have been some uncertainties relating to federal funding availability. There was a funding freeze that was then temporarily blocked and then backtracked. So we're still in a little bit of a limbo where we don't know exactly when USDA will be able to release that federal funding opportunity, which, like I mentioned before, is the opportunity that the state is applying to. And the state's application consists of projects that have been submitted to the state. So right now we are initiating the state level solicitation, but we can't really proceed ultimately without USDA releasing their funding opportunity. So what we're doing today is provisional. We are inviting project applications at this time. Would encourage interested applicants to start developing a proposal. But obviously, if USDA does not release their annual funding opportunity for whatever reason, then that would essentially mean that the program is not actually happening this year. Typically, we've received about $375,000 available. We expect about 340 of that to be available for projects in the state. And that's just based on historical trends, which we'll get into in a moment. Every year we solicit input from our stakeholders around the state, partners in the specialty crop industry and around agriculture as to what projects should be prioritized, what are the most pressing needs in the specialty crop industry in the state. And this year, what we've heard is that we should see projects focusing on increasing access to specialty crops and expanding specialty crop production and distribution. It's kind of a production side availability of specialty crops focus. Secondly, increasing consumption and consumer purchasing of specialty crops. So that'll be more of your consumer side, education focus. And then thirdly, improving the environmental sustainability of specialty crops. And these three priorities have actually been pretty consistent year over year. Every year for the past 4 years, these have been the priorities that the industry has put forward and told our department that should be of highest priority for this program. We are asking applications be submitted by March 23rd. So that's a Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. Right now, this application opened up about a week ago on February 3rd. So a little bit over a month and a half to work on your application. And since this is the 2025 program, you're applying right now for a project that would begin at the end of this September, and it would run for a 3-year period. Just a little bit of background on funding trends in the state. Like I mentioned before, it's frequently hovering around that $375,000 range. Last year, it was at that 375 level, and we were able to fund 4 projects. The previous year, we funded 6. The year before that, 5. The year before that, 4. So in that 4 to 7 project range is what the state is typically able to afford to fund with the allocation that we receive from USDA. So bear that in mind. Just in terms of the competition for these funds, there's a relatively small number of projects that we're able to fund each year. So if you're developing a project that's got a much larger budget, might behoove you to think about that just from a sheer volume perspective of what's able to be funded with the size of the program that we have available. We mentioned earlier the top 3 priorities that have been indicated that we should prioritize in the state. There are others. In addition to those first 2, their consumption and consumer purchasing, and then access and production distribution, you'll see several other opportunities. There's food safety, pet and disease control, new seed varieties, research and development, and at number 7, there's the environmental sustainability. So these are USDA's project categories. These correlate with what USDA calls outcomes. We'll talk about those a little bit, but when you fill out a project proposal template, you'll have an opportunity to select certain outcomes that you would like to target with your project. And this is the list that you can choose from. So again, when you are filling out an application, we'll be looking to see what you're planning to target and whether those priorities match the state's priorities. Who can apply? This is fortunately a relatively open-ended grant. There's a lot of opportunity for pretty wide range of interested individuals and organizations to get involved. State, local, and tribal governments, nonprofits we do see from time to time, research and educational institutions. This program does have a pretty solid research history. So lots of times there's projects that are focused on some sort of research and development, and that can take a variety of forms, but certainly welcome applications from research institutions. Also, we welcome applications from for-profit businesses and individual producers. Not every state will accept applications from for-profits for this program, and we'll go into some of the complexities of that in a moment. But individual producers and businesses that are in a for-profit incorporation are welcome to apply. This program is not just limited to nonprofits and research groups. I think an overarching filter should be that you're a South Dakota-based entity. So this program is only open to South Dakota entities. Every state has this program. So if you are in a different state, then you'll want to look at the specialty crop block grant opportunity in your state. And then as part of the application process, in order to receive federal funds, you must have a SAM.gov. That's the System for Award Management Unique Entity Identifier, or maybe you might hear the phrase UEI. And that's a unique code assigned by that federal award management system to your specific organization. So if you're interested in this program, what that means is you will need to have an incorporated business entity that legally exists that can be used to file with the System for Award Management to create that unique code that's attached to your business. So that'll require having an address and other physical identifiers that will allow you to register yourself to get that unique code. Without that code, it's impossible to receive federal awards. Some additional guidance, project guidelines, and these are consistent year over year. So if you've been involved with this program in the past, these won't be new, but proposals to this program cannot be funded if they fail to directly address and demonstratively enhance the competitiveness of eligible specialty crops. So again, just going back to the purpose of the program, if the project isn't going to enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops, then you'll need to look at a different program for that project idea. This won't be the program for you. A project needs to focus on something that's an eligible crop, one of those crops that are from that list that we talked about earlier. If it's an ineligible crop, then it's not going to work for this program. And then lastly, like I mentioned a moment ago, for-profits are welcome to apply, but if a project only benefits a single producer, organization, or business, then USDA will not allow the state to fund a project that does that. Projects need to have a larger benefit to the specialty crop industry, to your community, to the state. We are not able to fund projects that are targeting, perhaps just a specific financial investment in your business, or the scope of the benefit of your project will only help you. That's not something that we're able to consider. So want that to be very clear. We certainly respect everyone's time and some of the administrative requirements that are involved with applying for federal assistance. So we want people to have an accurate understanding of that at the beginning, so that you're not spending your time putting together a proposal that then turns out to be categorically ineligible. We'd certainly like to help avoid that if at all possible. And we usually do have success. We certainly have for-profit entities receiving funding during most years. So if that's you, certainly encourage you to take a closer look at the program and develop your project idea. Applicants can also address that need, that benefit scale question, by incorporating outreach into your project idea. So that way the results that you're producing as a result of your project are shared and put into a format that other people can use them and take advantage of them. And again, these are public funds. Taxpayer funded federal grants should have benefits that flow back to the taxpayer. So your project should produce something that is of value to society, to the state, to the specialty crop industry. That's certainly the goal for this program. And I mentioned earlier some of the budget constraints that we do face. South Dakota is on the lower end of the states in terms of the dollar value flowing into our state through this program. So we certainly prioritize projects that are under $75,000 budget requests. We struggle to fund a very large number of them, but we do like to prioritize diversity and prioritize funding several different projects that are accomplishing different things. And so in order to do that, we will frequently be looking at projects that are at a reasonable budget level that allows us to fund several, as opposed to tying up most of the money with just one or two larger projects. So if you're able to economize and find ways to scale your budget and your work plan accordingly to fit around that threshold, that will certainly help you during the competitive review. There's additional information available in our annual request for proposals, and I am going to paste the link to our program website into the chat of this call. And if you received the invitation to join this call, or if you received the announcement that this program was being opened, perhaps through the Danner press release or through a direct email from myself, then you'll have that link. The request for proposals and other documents are available on that website. And we can actually look at some of those more closely in a moment after we finish going through the slides of the presentation. We'll talk briefly here just some of the things that you can expect to work on and answers that you can expect to provide, and information that you'll need in order to complete a successful application. There's a USDA project profile template that's required to be used. It's the only format accepted, and it's in a fillable PDF template. This can be a little tricky, and the RFP outlines with pictures and detailed instructions how to access that template, and we'll demonstrate that in a moment. And then within that, there's several categories of information that we will kind of look at as we go through. I'll demonstrate how to fill out the form. But we'll look at the project purpose, your project's overall goal, objectives, which are your project's specific goals that you're going to accomplish, beneficiaries and external supporters, measurable outcomes and indicators. Again, those measurable outcomes are that list of 7 potential priorities. So if you are developing a project that's focused on consumer access, underneath that outcome, there will be a couple different indicators, which are those measurements. So you'll be selecting how you want to measure your success. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of those budget categories as well. Beyond that template, there's a couple other documents that you'll need. You'll need a cover sheet that our department has on our website, and I'll show you that. You'll need that SAM.gov unique entity identifier that we talked about a moment ago. And then if you have other supporting documents, if you've got schemata or figures or other information about your project idea that doesn't fit within the USDA template, we certainly welcome you to send that to us. This application is received via email, so there will be, it's certainly possible to do that. We also have a checklist which can help you as you're filling out all the information and making sure that you've got everything in your application package ready. And then the South Dakota planning districts, or the economic development districts, are available to help. They are regional. So if you go online and you look up, and there's a link to this form in our request for proposals, you can find where, based on where you are in the state, which economic development district, which planning district covers that territory. And then the folks there can actually help you with your application. They can be a helpful resource, and they're experienced with navigating the federal grant system. They can help you if you're struggling with the form or other things like that. So definitely encourage you to take advantage of that resource. USDA does have some terms and conditions which can help you as you're developing your proposal, because these will be critical during, if your project is funded, you'll be obligated to abide by these during the course of performing your project. So there's important details in there, such as what types of costs are allowed. These rules govern all of USDA's programs that they run through the Agricultural Marketing Service, including the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. So it can be helpful to check that out while you're doing your budget, especially because when you submit your project, I'll take a look right away, and I'll be looking to see if you have things included in your budget that are ineligible. So you can preempt some of that and save everybody some work and put yourself in the best position possible by reviewing some of those allowability questions in advance and making sure that the things that you're putting in your budget, the things that you're planning on in order to have a successful project, are types of costs that USDA allows. Here's the timeline for where we're going. Right now, we're at the beginning of the arrow there. We just announced the program opportunity on February 3rd, with applications due on March 23rd. After the application deadline, we'll have an expert review panel score the projects according to a matrix that's the same for every project. So they'll be ranking projects, and then they'll have an opportunity to evaluate which projects should be funded. And then those projects that rise to the top in that competitive review, those will be collated together in a portfolio that the state will propose to USDA. Now, typically that happens by May 1st. Like I mentioned earlier, USDA has not actually released their annual request for proposals to the states yet. So some of this could still change, but I'm anticipating that USDA will release that announcement sometime by the end of this month. And I'm anticipating a similar deadline and a similar timeline to what we've seen in most typical years. So that puts us still around that early May timeframe is what I'm expecting. After that, once the state submits our plan to USDA, we work with USDA to finalize what's in that plan, which will be receiving approval for those specific projects that the state has proposed to fund. During that time, if your project is funded, the state might come back to you and say, hey, USDA had this and that question about your project, or we might need to change something. So we'll work with the successful applicants at that point in time. Goal being to get those projects approved, get formal legal agreements signed in time for you to begin work on September 30th. Here's my contact information. And again, this is on the website, and can certainly reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat here if you'd like a copy of this presentation. And again, I plan to post the recording for this office hours on our website. So what we want to do now is briefly look through the project profile template. And I'm hopeful that everyone can see that. Dragged it over to that window. Hopefully still sharing that. We can close our slideshow here and take a look at the project profile template. This is the form that you'll be filling out. Here's how you get there. This is our website. So you can see the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources. There's a page for the Specialty Crop Block Grant. If you go to the Resource Conservation and Forestry drop-down menu, Specialty Crop Block Grant is available through that link there. So you click on that, you'll go to the page for this program. You can view the request for proposals. There's a little banner at the top. Click here to view the request for proposals. That'll take you to the request for proposals that has all the relevant information about this program. So you'll want to review that very carefully as you apply. If we go back to the main page here, we can see the application cover sheet. If we open that, that looks like this. That's where you put your organization name, your SAM.gov unique entity identifier, your contact information, the project title, how much money you're requesting, your proposed start dates, and your signature. So that's a form that our department requires. That's not a USDA form. That's a Danner form. One helpful resource is this little checklist. This has some tips about, don't forget this in that document. Make sure you've done everything that you need to do. There's also some boxes where you'll click saying that you understand something. So for some key provisions and some key details that are important to understand, such as dates and other things that you'll be expected to do if you have a successful proposal, those are things that we want to make sure that you've reviewed and understand in advance. So this checklist is a resource for you. You're not obligated to turn the checklist into us, but you can certainly be helped and help yourself, at the very least, help yourself stay organized while you're developing your proposal if you use that. You can see my contact information here on the webpage. And then there's other forms, such as most significantly right now, well, we have a link to the USDA terms and conditions. So if you click that, that'll take you to the rules document that we talked about a moment ago. And then there's a link to the USDA website. So if you click that, that'll take you over to the USDA program website where you can click how to apply, or you can click specialty crop definition. And this shows you all of the crops that count as specialty crops. So this is an important website. It's linked through our web page, so you don't have to go try to find it on USDA's website. You can use ours and we'll link you over there. Last thing that we want to talk about is that project profile template. I've already got it downloaded, but I'll show you what happens when you click on the link. When you click the link here, it'll probably give you an error page. And this is not anything wrong with your computer, not anything wrong with your Adobe Acrobat, or anything wrong with the way you've tried to access the document. This is common. So there's a button here, a little downward arrow. It's the download button. And you'll want to click that. When you do, the document will save into somewhere on your computer. So I have a folder called sample folder. You can save your document there, and then you'll go into your file explorer and you'll be able to pull it up from there. And when you do that, then you'll be working from the desktop instead of in your web browser. So you'll go open the document up in Adobe on your computer instead of trying to open it on your web browser. And when you do that, it should work. That's how you'll access it. You can't, unfortunately, open this template on your web browser. But in here, once you get in here, you'll see organization information, your project title, your project partner, and summary. You'll describe the purpose. There's a little blurb here, which is kind of like the public-facing executive summary, which USDA uses when they create their big list of all the projects that are funded. So kind of for public media consumption level of detail. And then you'll put your more substantive description of what your project is, why you want to do it, what are the reasons you're looking at this project under your project purpose. From there, you'll find where you can fill in your objectives, what you want to do and why, your beneficiary information. If you have received a grant before, you'll fill out kind of information about that. There is a place to talk about external project support. So if you have partners who are supporting you or groups that you're working with as part of your project, you'll enter that information there. And then here's our outcome measures. So again, increasing consumption and consumer purchasing, that was one of our priorities. That's outcome number 1. If you click that, then the indicators pop up. You can see without it, it's rolled up. So in order to make the options appear, you got to click. And then that'll show you, okay, total number of consumers who gain knowledge about specialty crops. You can say, well, as part of my project, I'm going to raise awareness of specialty crops amongst consumers. And I think I'm going to do that in a way that probably reaches 50 people. So you could write 50 there. And then you could say, well, there'll be about half adults and half children. You write both of those things. And then boom, now you've selected an outcome and an indicator that you're going to measure the success of your project against. So that's how you do that. Again, you won't see that unless you click. And if you accidentally click off of it, you click it again, the information that you entered will still be there. Then you'll get down into the budget, relatively straightforward. A couple key categories. Personnel. If you are paying somebody or doing some work yourself and you want part of your budget to include the time or that it costs for you to do that, you can enter salary information for that person. Also fringe benefits, insurance and healthcare and things like that. Travel, there is an expectation that you provide a detailed explanation of the trips that you'll make. There's a number of different ways to put travel in your budget that could be based on hotel nights. It could be based on gas receipts. It could be based on a calculation of the value of the mileage that you drove or something like that. And that'll all be explained in there, but there's a unit cost and then a total cost. Equipment, if you are renting general equipment, you could describe that. Or if you want to purchase special purpose equipment that's got a specific use for a specific scientific or technical accomplishment or activity, then you can propose that here as well. The threshold is that the item is under $5,000. Supplies budget, you need some supplies. If you have a contractor, then you'll use the contractual section instead of the personnel section. And then other, if there's other things that you need, such as paying for a subscription or paying for a publishing service to publish your materials, or attending a conference, then that's the section you'll excuse me, that's the section you'll use for that. Indirect costs, this will usually apply to nonprofits or educational or research institutions that have a formulaic rate where they're accruing overhead costs for their organization. So an individual producer won't have an indirect cost rate. For-profits usually will not. So that is the template that you have to fill out. And that is the most important document that we will receive, and that's the one where you'll be spending most of your time. So with that, I am going to maybe pull the slideshow back up just in case anybody has questions about it. And then we will stop sharing it, or we'll leave it up there. But we're done with the presentation. So we'll go into kind of a Q&A opportunity now. So everybody should have the ability to unmute if you have questions. You can also use the chat. And from this point, we can sort of just go into open Q&A. Two things that I forgot to mention that I did want to make a note about preemptively would be that for projects that do have for projects being submitted by people from organizations with more organizational policy, if you're not just by yourself, you're not an individual or a for-profit, please make sure that as you're submitting a project, you work through the appropriate approvals internally. We have had projects where someone submits a proposal and their budget office didn't review it correctly. So then the state has awarded them funds, and then their budget office has been caught off guard by some of the information in there. So if that's you, if you're applying as part of an organization, please make sure that you navigate those informational channels internally prior. With that, that's kind of the only other comment that I wanted to make sure to comment on, and again, recording this so other people can see it. So we'll go into open Q&A and discussion, anything that we can talk about. And if you have specific questions about a specific policy project, I'm happy to answer that to a degree. If it would be helpful to others, we can certainly follow up individually if that would be helpful as well. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, things that they'd like me to explain more? Okay, there's a question in the chat. Could you talk more about external project support? Can I work with experts in other states? So typically what we're talking about with external project support will be other partners that are either helping you or that you've talked to in advance of proposing your project idea, and they support that. They agree with you that there's a need for that type of a project in the state, and that they would like to see you pursue that idea. So oftentimes, I'll put it, for example, if an individual producer has a project idea, a for-profit individual producer, and they want to evaluate some sort of management practice on their operation in a way that they think would create beneficial learning for other producers growing a similar type of crop in the state, maybe there's an organization associated with that crop, or maybe there's a research partner that they've consulted with, or a local conservation district or NRCS office or something like that, that is writing a letter of support saying, yeah, we've talked to them, they came to us and asked some technical questions about that idea, we think it's a good project, we'd like them to do that project. That's usually what that's going to involve. If you are working on more of a research element, dealing with other states, that's going to be a little bit less what we're thinking of here. There is actually a multi-state specialty crop specialty crop grant, which is different than this. I have not participated in that before, but the point of this program is not cross-state activities. Within our region, it's certainly expected and common for there to be projects that will create benefits that would benefit producers in other states. We have a project right now working on some great wine grape varietal research, and there's some synergies with North Dakota, for example. So we've seen that. But if your primary support is from researchers and other institutions outside of the state, that's not uninteresting, but it doesn't really tell us a whole lot about the value of the project for South Dakota. And I think what you're trying to do when you demonstrate external project support is you're trying to demonstrate the value of the project for South Dakota. And if you, follow-up question, including supporting letters. So you'll want to talk about your external support in that external support section of the proposal template. But then you can also, like I said, this is a email-based submission. So when you submit your proposal, your cover sheet, you'll also submit letters of support just via email to me. So just as an email attachment. Other questions about anything that we can talk about right now? Our website has a number for me that is not my direct number. So I will paste my phone number into the chat in case you would like to copy and paste that into a note document for yourself. You can certainly call me. I'm happy to talk about your specific situation more. We have had a variety of projects funded over the years, so it's certainly possible that I can maybe point you to something similar to what you're thinking about if you're looking at the feasibility of a project idea. I'll also point out that in the request for proposals, there is we'll go back over here. If we go into the request for proposals, I'm not sure which page it is, but we'll find it quickly. Bottom of page 5, under eligible project proposals, there's a link to the USDA's running list of projects that have been funded in the past. So there you can find past South Dakota Specialty Crop Block Grant awards. And then you can also see awards from other states. So if we go over here, say from last year, this is all the grants funded through this program throughout the entire United States. So if you are wondering, can I do this or that? I'm not sure if I've ever seen a project dealing with something like that before. That's a good way to see if USDA has funded something like that in the past. It's also a good way to see what other what other successful projects have been funded in terms of how much money they were awarded and for different types of activities or different types of crops. So that can be a cool thing just to look around in and see what else this program has funded and invested in. Any other